Let's be clear. Let's be clear. We do not gather tonight because we are afraid to die. We do not gather tonight because we cannot accept death. Let's be clear. We are not here tonight because we don't want to die. We accept death. What we do not and cannot accept is the senseless death of our children, our boys and our girls, our husbands, our sons, our sisters and our brothers, our grandmothers, our grandchildren. We will all die one day. And we are not all promised a good death, a sweet death, nor even a long life. But it is the senseless death, the unjust murder, the scandalous killing by those who are sworn to protect us. And that is from the police to the criminal injustice system. The constantly having to make sense of it all. This is why we are here tonight, because of the senseless death of life cut short. And it is bad enough to have to identify your child's lifeless corpse, but to be asked to identify your child's voice as he is screaming for life, that is inhumane. Yeah. Imagine being made to sit as Trayvon's mother was, there on a stand and being asked to listen with poise and dignity at the sound of your child screaming for help. And imagine knowing that your child cried out for help and no one bothered to come to his rescue. At the heart of this story, at the heart of this senseless death, at the heart of this crime, at the heart of this evil, there is a child that no one sees as a child, but as a big, black, menacing man. The story of Trayvon Martin. The plaintive cry for help, punctuated by a gunshot. The image of Trayvon, 17 and looking young for his age, in a jersey with the hood, iced tea, and Skittles. This is the tragedy. And I don't know how to make sense of the unanswered cries for help of a boy in Sanford, Florida. I don't know how to make sense of Michael Brown's body laying face down in blood for 4 hours in the middle of the street. I don't know how to make sense of a young girl being shot in the face through a screen door for stumbling on a stranger's doorstep and asking for help. How do we make sense of scenes like these repeatedly existing in the 21st century? And gatherings, oh my God, gatherings like these that represent our collective attempt as people of faith to make sense of the senselessness of it all. Senseless. And here we are, activists and preachers, hell-raisers, young and old, pretending to be able to make sense of it, pretending that it can be explained and named and traced and exegeted and preached about. The irrationality of racism, the irrationality of evil, the evilness of evil. The irrationality of racism seeks and makes us gather. It makes us gather. It makes us gather and try to explain that which cannot be explained. The irrationality of the death of unarmed black men, just as the irrationality of misogynism, just always forcing us, requiring us to justify our rape and our kidnap and the death of black females. There are some things that make no sense. And the Bible has a way of handling things that make no sense. You scream and you cry out. You scream, call for the weeping women, and let them lift up a wail. Some things make no sense. Call for those who know how to pierce the senselessness of it all. Call for those who know that there are some things that words cannot heal. Call for the crying women. Call for the women who are in touch with their emotions. Call for the women who have been blamed for being emotional, blamed for being hysterical, blamed for being PMS. Call for the crying women and let them lift up a wail over them. And let each woman teach her daughter a wail, for death has come in to our windows and snuffed out our lives, sometimes crying and weeping and wailing are the only appropriate things that can be done, Trayvon. And so as a 17-year-old young boy, his last words were not a sentence with a noun and a subject, a noun and a verb. Were not a sentence with an infinitive or a preposition. His last words were a scream. A boy screamed because he was a child, and children in trouble scream. It is right that he should have screamed because he was a child. And some things are too senseless for words and explanation and exegesis and pontification and even preaching. Crying and weeping are the only things that make sense. Father, I stretch my hands to thee. No other help I know. It is our tradition. It is what the blues music is about. It is what jazz emerged in our life. It is the music that we grew up when we couldn't say another thing, when we could not explain another thing. We just began to moan and groan with words that could not be interpreted. It was sitting on the mourner's bench and crying out to God. It is weeping and wailing and weeping and wailing. If I don't wake up in the morning, it'll be all right. It is the blues music of our people who know how to take pain and turn it into theology. This old building is beginning to lean. I got to move to a better home. It is the blues of our people. It is the ability to take pain, to take sorrow, to take grief, and to turn it into theology of crying out to God, because some things make no sense. Yeah. It is Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because her children are no more. How many times have I sat watching before televisions and marvel, and I'm not trying to make this a gendered sermon, but it must become a gendered sermon. How many times have I sat before the television watching after a tragedy and how the fathers or the husbands come out before the microphone and began to talk about the tragedy of losing their children and being able to stand there and speak just with poise and yes, with some animation, but poise and dry eye, my God, dry eye, as they talk about the loss of a wife and the loss of a children. And I'm sitting there, and when I do not see the mothers and I do not see the wives, I know where the women are. I know where the women are. Women are somewhere crying out to God, saying, God, why? God, how long? God, how come? God, where are you? God, why? When was the last time you cried? When was the last time you screamed? And I don't mean for the Seattle Seahawks or the New England Patriots. We sit here in this magnificent sanctuary, which has its own strange history, archiving and commodifying Black Lives Matter. Why are we not up the street at Abyssinian? Why are we not in Queens at Greater Allen Cathedral, where the people we are preaching about worship? There's a whole group of people whom we have named tonight who will never come to Riverside. Their mothers and their fathers and their aunties and their cousins, they are not here. They will not come here. And yet we bring the best and the brightest, an archive in history, to have met here, and that is no disrespect to this place. Nelson Mandela spoke here. Castro, Tutu, Martin King. But our people, those who are being choked to death, and those who are screaming, they're at the little Pentecostal church, the storefront church. Come on here, somebody. They're somewhere with a tambourine in their hands and with a doily on their head, singing, "The Lord will make a way somehow." Put your hands together for them. We have an expression in the South, and I flew here from the South, where it's just a few degrees warmer. I stood today outside the hotel for 40 minutes trying to hail a taxi with not enough clothes on. And I tried not to see it as racism, that every cab I hailed kept driving by. Everything is not about race, but those things that are. And the killing of black mothers' sons until it becomes important as the killing of white mothers' sons. Ella Baker says, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest." And those of us who not only are sun-kissed, but also female-kissed, we understand the importance and the significance of tears, of crying. We have an expression in the South, and I'm sure you've used it here, for crying out loud. For God's sake, for Christ's sake, for heaven's sake, for God's sake, for Christ's sake, it is an expression of exasperation. It is an expression of just bewilderment. It is an expression of when you're at your wits' end, when something does not make sense. For crying out loud, who kills the unarmed and leaves their body in the street for hours? For crying out loud, who kills unarmed grandmothers sitting in their homes, reaching for their cane? For crying out loud, who kills 9-year-old little girls laying on a sofa and being mistaken for a drug dealer? For crying out loud, who kills a man and chokes him for selling cigarettes? For crying out loud, who kills someone simply because he's queer? Makes me want to holler, throw up my hands. It makes you want to holler and throw up both your hands. Makes you want to holler and throw up both your hands. Trayvon's generation deserves better fates than what our collective fear and continued racial hatred generates. And so I come to close with an apology, as I believe Father Flager, my friend, will allow me to say, he and I being the two oldest, the elders among this lineup of young Turks. We owe your generation an apology. We thought we had nailed things down for you. We thought we were passing on to you a better future, a more secure future. It's not that we thought that race had been conquered. We thought that at least we had given you a system and bequeathed to you a system where there was redress. We thought in our youthfulness and in our rashness, and in our naivete, and in our youthful brashness, we thought that with the student movement and with the anti-war and anti-Vietnam movement, and we thought with women's rights that we could pass on to you a better world, and we thought that it would be better for you. And perhaps you are right to be scornful of us, to sneer. Lord knows I never thought I lived long enough to be sneered at. I never thought that I would live long enough to be an old guard. I never thought I would live long enough to be y'all. Could it be that it was all so simple then? Or has time rewritten every line? And if we had the chance to do it all again, tell me, would we? Could we? Memories. Just keep on living. Every generation blames the one before. And so either we were naive and idealistic and overconfident about our youthful accomplishments, or, and here is the warning to you young ones, or we underestimated the intractable nature of evil and sin. Either we were naive about our power, or we were naive about the power of evil. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but we wrestle against powers of darkness, spiritual wickedness in high places. And if you're going to fight this power, you've got to have also another power. Come on here and give God some praise. And so I admonish you, walk together, children, and don't get tired. I admonish you that whatever you do, hold to God's unchanging hand. I admonish you to learn how, and I have to use this example, and it's not to be funny, but it is an example from a woman's world. Often when I am in a heated disagreement with my spouse, and there is a point in the argument, there's the argument, and then there's the real argument. And when we get to the real argument, it's when my neck starts moving and my hand starts moving and my voice goes up a couple of octaves and tears come down my eyes. And just when I'm about to drive home my point, he stops me and says that which men say so well. It's obvious that we can't continue this conversation because you are hysterical. Yes, learn how to fight and cry at the same time. Just because I'm crying doesn't mean I'm not fighting. I trust God that as God said to Hagar, I know you're crying, but I have heard the cries of the little boy. And because of the little boy, I will save the people of Ishmael. Tonight, Hagar may be crying, Rachel may be crying, but God says, I have heard the cries of the little boy. Thanks be to God. God heard Trayvon's cry.